With the approval of the Bitcoin ETF, we're seeing a lot of volatility and price action right now. How can we look at this? What's the best way to play this market in the next week, 2 weeks, and 2 months? That's what we're going to talk about today on Crypto Intel. And stay tuned to the end, because I'm going to compare and contrast what's happening with Bitcoin right now alongside of what's going to be happening as we get closer and closer to the Bitcoin halving. You don't want to miss this one. Let's get started. Okay, so let's assume that the ETF has been approved. And now we want to know, okay, so where's the price action going to go next? What's going to happen with Bitcoin? And, I've seen a lot of talk about what happened yesterday with the fake tweet from the SEC saying that Bitcoin was approved and saying that, this is telling us that it's going to be a sell the news event. I'm not so sure that that's true, because this is a chart that people like to point out where they say, look, here's the tweet that said that it is approved. We have a spike up, then we have a big jump down. Then we have Gary Gensler saying that, no, it's not approved. It was a hack. And Bitcoin goes up, but it doesn't go up very far. And so, really what happened here was that the price was, somewhere around 46.7 or so. It went all the way up to 48. It went all the way back down to 44.8, and then back up just a little bit below where it was. But this kind of thing, now you have to remember, this is on the 15-minute time frame. So each one of these bars is 15 minutes long. But every time there's a big announcement, whether it's the FOMC announcement or something that has to do with interest rates or something that has to do with inflation, on the very small time frames like these 15 or 5-minute time frames, we always see this kind of action where it goes up, goes way down, it comes back up, and it's just, this is just volatility here. So we can't say that because this happened yesterday on that fake tweet, that this means that, Bitcoin has topped out now, regionally topped out, and is going to have a, 20-30% drop. It could have a drop, but I don't think that on the very short term, within the first day or so, we're going to be able to know that. The best thing and the most practical thing I think to do is to let the volatility play out for the first few hours, maybe the first day or so, and then make a decision. Now, let's go back and take a look at what happens when we have a kind of temporary top with Bitcoin. You can see here, this is on the weekly chart, and what I'm doing here is looking back at some of the different price action that happens right before and after the Bitcoin halving, because that's really going to tell us a little bit more about what the price action is going to be, whether we're going to have a big dip or not. So you can see here in 2016, the price went up and it did dip right before the halving. This is June, and the halving was in July. So, about a month before the halving, what we see here, let's just take a look at the dip here. It went from here down to here. That was about a 30% dip, about a month or two before the halving. At the halving, we did then dip again, and you can see right here that went another about 30%. So we had a run up a few months before the halving. We had a dip down about 30%. It went back up. It kind of went sideways for a while. We had another dip out, and then we were off to the races. Now let's look at the last halving event. So here we had, now this was a little bit of an outlier, because you can see prior to the halving, here's the halving right here in May of 2020. You can see that prior to that, in March of 2020, we had that big dump. That was I think that's more than 50%. Let's not use, without using the big wicks here, it was about a 50% move, but that was because of COVID. Okay, so I don't anticipate anything that big unless we do have some kind of black swan. But you can see again that about, looks like this was about in March, April, May, again, about 2 months before the halving, we did have a dip, a substantial dip around 40%. We went back up towards the halving. At the halving, we did have another dip. You can see right here, if we measure this out right after the halving from here, oops, that's not the right thing. Let me get the right, here we go. Right here, right after the halving, down to about here, that's about a 17% dip. And then again, we're off to the races. So, we can anticipate to have maybe we can anticipate to have maybe a 20 to 30% dip sometime between now and the halving, okay? Now, what's going to mitigate that? Well, let's again take a look at what's happening with this ETF. The first thing is, yes, it could be that price action kind of, like it says here, price action has kind of had a local top here at 48K. It looks like we've kind of gone to 48, just about 48K. That's a big level. There's a nice resistance level right here. You can see right about at that down 10 or 20%. Again, if we take a look at this, we could go up to 48K. We could, 20% will bring us down to about, right about here, well, that's 15%. 20% will bring us somewhere around 38K. 30% somewhere around 33, 32K. Okay, so we could see some kind of dip down there. I would take that as a buying opportunity. But here's the thing that we need to keep in mind. And again, this is going to be over a period of a month or two. The first thing is that, let me look at this here. This is a nice article, why Bitcoin won't crash 30% after the ETF. And basically, what he's saying is that, number one, the ETF providers are in a race to lower their fees. That means that they're very focused on getting as much money into the funds as possible, as soon as possible, okay? And so, what he says here is very interesting. If BlackRock, Invesco, and ARK meet their targets, that is, their targets for how much money to pull into the ETF, the three of them alone could bring in $11 billion into Bitcoin within 12 months. And there are others that are estimating even quicker amounts. Like, for instance, if we look here at Better Markets, they heard that right here, BlackRock has more than $2 billion lined up in week one with new incremental whole flows into existing Bitcoin holders. $2 billion within 1 week. And Bloomberg's ETF analysis, Eric Balkunis, who's very well respected, said that caught his attention. And if it's true, it would be, what he says, it would be on brand for BlackRock. In other words, this is what BlackRock does. They don't get into an ETF unless they have a lot of money lined up to push into it. Now, it's not going to go all in one day. That's why you can't look at the 15-minute chart and look at the volatility there and say, okay, everything's over. This is going to run out for a couple months, but there's going to be a lot of money coming into Bitcoin because of the ETF. So what I did was I looked at BART and I asked it to tell me, okay, what would happen if there is a $1 billion inflow in the first week or two into Bitcoin? And what would happen if there's a $3 or $4 billion inflow? And this is what it came back. About a 5%, $1 billion inflow would increase the price about 5 to 10%. A $3 to $5 billion inflow would increase the price maybe 15 to 30%. So anywhere from between 5 to 20% is what I would expect before we have drop in price of 30 or 25 or 30%. So if we go back to the chart here and we look at where we're at here, 5 to 30%, 30%, that would bring Bitcoin all the way up to around $60,000. 20% around 55, and 5%, that would be close to $50,000. So I do expect that in the short term, in the next few weeks, we're probably going to see have one more push up, maybe to around 50, maybe a little bit more than $50,000. Then we might have a pullback, but it's not going to be a big pullback, because I want to go back here again. This article where it says why Bitcoin won't crash a big 30%. And that is mainly because of the percent of long-term holders is sitting about 70%. 70% of people are long-term holders of Bitcoin, which means that they're going to be reticent to sell Bitcoin when it's moving up towards the halving and moving up towards its all-time high. You can see here that right now we're at 76.2% of long-term holders in Bitcoin. So that is why I don't expect to have a big jump up right away or a big jump down right away. We're going to have some fluctuation in the next few weeks, but I think generally Bitcoin's price is going to be moving up. We will eventually have I'm predicting about a 20 to 25% drop. And then I don't think that'll be long term. I think it'll be short term. It's going to be bought up because there are going to be much more participants in the market because of the ETF who are going to want to buy Bitcoin at a little bit of a lower price. So that's all for today. Hope you liked the content. If you do, please give us a like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.